You know, the message I've just shared with you is one that I almost didn't want to share this week, simply because I've been having to work through some tough stuff. And then also in the news, there's tough stuff. There's always painful things there, isn't there? We think of the residential schools, and how do we unpack that? How do we process this evil? Because we are all broken people, and there's the dark, unswept corners of our minds that we want no one to really know about. And today, helping me unpack the subject is Kathy Isaac. Kathy is an educator. She's an international speaker. She is an author, recently writing the book, Don't Tell. It's a story that unpacks a true story of a woman who's been abused, raped, violated, and you don't want to read it, but you want to read it because we find out how it works through in our life. Kathy, I want to welcome you today. Thanks for coming to Perspectives and for helping share a bit of your heart about such an important subject. Tell me about the book, Don't Tell, because you can find it anywhere, in Amazon, Walmart, it's all out there everywhere. What's Don't Tell all about?
Yeah, Don't Tell is a story of a friend of mine, Joni Brousseau. At 14, she found out she was pregnant, and at 15, she had her father's child.
Wow.
That just sent her spinning, as you can well imagine. And she just suffered for a long time. And at 40, she found Jesus, and that's where her life really began.
Wow.
So it's a story of brokenness, redemption, and restoration.
You know, tell us why the story actually resonates with you, because that becomes a lead to the next question as we try to look for resolution and how do we find a way forward. But this story struck a chord in your own life too, didn't it?
Mm-hmm. It's really a story of how you can not only be affected by your own sin, but you can also be impacted by the sins of others.
Yeah.
And in my life, I was molested by a grandfatherly figure in our church, and her story really resonated with me on a much lesser level. But I know that in my life, it took me years to overcome that. And once I was able to leave that pain at the cross, at feet of Jesus, I was able to have freedom and live for him. And Joni finds this as well in her story.
Yeah, and it seems that as you write this story, really, you're writing part of your narrative under the pseudonym of Joni as well, because you understand those feelings and don't for a moment underplay your painful experience as well. In the book, you talk about how Joni comes to a place of freedom. And tell me about that, and a place of forgiveness. How do you work through that? Because we need to hear this. We need to hear this. I don't know how to process what happened to the residential schools. I find it hard enough as a pastor, you know, a couple times a week I hear stories of pain, and I try to process those. How do you process it? How do you get to the place of forgiveness? You talk about that in the book. Take us down that road.
Yeah, it is a journey of forgiveness. It's not generally something that's going to happen overnight. And for Joni, in her story, she had to unpack all of the trauma that happened for her. With help from psychiatrists and other medical staff and medication, she had to go through the dark tunnels to find out what had happened, because our bodies are created in such a wonderful way that when we have trauma in our life, oftentimes we are removed from that trauma in order to survive. And this is what happened with Joni as well. But she did get to the point where she accepted Christ, and Christ showed her that he had died for sins. He had died for her father's sins. He had died for her sins. He had died for the world's sins. And so she was able to feel freedom then. And God gave her a family, a church family that surrounded her and helped walk her through it. And she ended up receiving all the desires of her heart.
So
Psalms 37, 4 and 5 says, do what the Lord wants and he will give you your heart's desires. Let the Lord lead you and trust him to help. And that's what she did. And she did receive all the desires of her heart. She received a new family, brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers. It was wonderful.
So when you say that, I'm excited to hear that, but I can't help but think that people are listening right now and saying, what do? You say a prayer to Jesus and everything just goes away, all the pain and the memories? How does Jesus impact, how did he impact Joni's life and how did he impact yours as you experienced his forgiveness? Wasn't it the other people that needed to be forgiven and also dealt a good right hand?
Yeah, sometimes you feel like dealing that right hand. But for Joni, she struggled for a long time, and she had put her mother on a pedestal, thinking that her mother, she had loved her mother. She loved her father. When her father was ill, she came back to care for him because she still loved him. And the challenges of her life were hidden from her for a long time. But when it was like a war for her to go through all of the trauma that had happened to her. So it wasn't an easy, flick the switch and everything's done. And she needed medication. She tells me often that she embraces her medication because oftentimes you take your medication if you have a mental illness and you think that you're fine and you think that things are going well and you don't need your medication anymore. And she tells me often, I embrace my medication. The Lord gave me the doctors to help me, and I embrace that medication because I know that that is part of the healing. And for other mental illnesses that she had, she was healed. God healed her from them, but some she still needs medication for. And I think that's an important thing too. It's not, life doesn't turn wonderful necessarily that, you're not walking down, easy street because you've become a Christian. There are still many trials and tribulations that will continue to happen, but God is there and he will walk with you. And if you lay those, and for me, I had to get to the point where I could just lay those burdens on the feet of Christ on the cross and say, you carried this burden for me already. I don't need to be tormented by this. I don't need to have this weigh on me anymore. You have already paid the price. And so then I am released and I am free to do what he wants me to do. Ephesians 2:10 says that we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do the good works which God has prepared in advance for us to do.
That's a great verse.
He has a plan for us.
Yeah.
And when we allow him to release us from the baggage of our past, we can focus in on the plans that he has, the good works that he has set for us to do.